Hello and welcome to Human Anatomy Prep. I'm Ty Gardner and I'll be your instructor. This lecture will cover terms of direction. Our goal is to be able to describe the locations of our body parts. We will start by defining the anatomical position. We will then define and utilize terms commonly used to describe the location of a part. These terms come in pairs like medial and lateral because locations are relative. That means we use one body part to describe the location of another. For example, where is the elbow? The elbow is closer to the torso than the wrist, but it's farther from the torso than the armpit. Finally, we will discuss several planes that can divide the body. If a cut is performed at a plane, it's referred to as a section. So what is this anatomical position? In the anatomical position, a person is standing erect and facing forward, with feet forward, arms at the side, and palms facing forward. This allows parts to have a defined position, even when we change position. Let's begin looking at the terms of direction with anterior and posterior. Remember, they come in pairs. Anterior and ventral both mean towards the front. We use them interchangeably. We might talk about the anterior side of the body. This contains the ventral cavity. Here's the anterior side of the humerus, the bone of the upper arm, showing the intertubercular groove. Posterior and dorsal both mean towards the back. We also use these interchangeably. We might talk about the posterior side of the body. This contains the dorsal cavity. Here is the posterior side of the humerus, showing the olecranon fossa. Superior and cranial both mean towards the head. We generally use superior, but you should be familiar with cranial. We have better words for the limbs, so we usually stick with the torso for this pair. The sternocleidomastoid muscle attaches to the cranial, or superior, surface of the clavicle. Inferior means towards the feet. The rhomboid major muscle is inferior to the rhomboid minor. Caudal means towards the tail and is better for quadrupeds, animals that walk on four legs. We use a form of caudal, caudate, as the name of a minor lobe of the liver that is posterior. Medial means towards the midline of the body. Lateral means away from the midline of the body. This is a posterior view of the scapula, also known as the shoulder blade. The scapula has a medial border, orange line, and a lateral border, green line. Some of our muscles attach the medial border to our vertebrae, moving the scapula when they contract. Muscles attached to the lateral border and the flat surfaces of the scapula move the humerus. Proximal means towards the origin or point of attachment. Distal means away from the origin or point of attachment. The head of the humerus, the ball, is on the proximal end and attaches to the scapula. The distal end of the humerus has smooth surfaces to attach to the radius and ulna, the bones of the forearm. Superficial means at or towards the surface. Deep means under or below the surface. Our skin is superficial to our muscles, but it has layers that can be described using both of these terms. The epidermis is the superficial layer of the skin. It has dead, dry cells on its surface. The dermis is deep to the epidermis, but superficial to the subcutaneous layer, also called the hypodermis. A plane is an imaginary surface that divides the body. We'll look at the three primary planes. A section is a cut performed along one of these planes that allows us to see the internal anatomy. A sagittal plane divides the body into left and right portions. If a section occurs along the midline, it is called mid-sagittal. If to the side, but in a sagittal plane, it is parasagittal. Here we see a sagittal section of the skull showing the frontal sinus, a cavity in the frontal bone. A coronal or frontal plane divides the body into anterior and posterior parts. Here we see a coronal section of the brain allowing us to see the deep white matter layer, the cerebral medulla. A transverse or horizontal plane divides the body into superior and inferior parts. Here we see a transverse section of the thigh. We can see lots of muscles and the femur, the bone of the thigh. I hope this has been helpful. Your next stop is the video on body regions.